Two-Face here, back with another reaction video. This time I'm playing catch up with this Napoleon series from Epic History TV. So this is now Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812. So I've heard this was a catastrophe for Napoleon, but I'm not sure how it played out to be a catastrophe for Napoleon and the Grande Armée, is it pronounced? French names, it's downhill from there. So the link to the original video will be in the description down below. Please go subscribe to Epic History TV, show them all the support and their sponsors. And let's not waste my time, let's get into this. One must have ever asked for the fortune, then she can be great. Sorry.
Russia.
Sorry, I hate it when it...
1812. Napoleon invades his former ally.
Yeah.
With the largest army Europe has ever seen.
What's it, roughly 600,000 men?
But for the French Emperor, the decisive blow remains frustratingly beyond reach.
Now, I'm interested to see how this plays out.
Russia's resilience is unlike anything he's ever encountered. And as winter closes in, his army begins the most infamous retreat in history.
Let's turn that down a bit. Sorry, it's blaring through my speakers.
In 1807, following his defeat of the Russian army at Friedland, Napoleon had travelled to Tilsit to meet the Russian Emperor Alexander. During their celebrated encounter, the two emperors formed a friendship and made an alliance. But it was not to last. Over the next 5 years, relations between France and Russia
I bet it's got something to do with the continental system.
The Russians were irritated by Napoleon's creation of a Duchy of Warsaw in Poland, which they regarded as meddling in their own front yard.
Am I the only one who thinks Russia and Germany have always got something against Poland for some reason? They always got it in for Poland. As I said, I could be wrong, but who knows?
They feared it would lead to the return of a fully fledged Polish state.
What's wrong with that?
A thorn in Russia's side.
How is it?
Then there was Napoleon's offer to marry Alexander's sister, Grand Duchess Anna Pavlovna, to cement their alliance. Okay. But the Romanovs hated the idea, and after a year of Russian prevarication, Napoleon married Marie-Louise, daughter of the Austrian emperor, instead.
Okay.
Later that year, Napoleon broke a guarantee made at Tilsit and annexed the Duchy of Oldenburg, ruled by Alexander's sister's father-in-law.
Okay.
Worst of all was the fallout over the continental system. Napoleon's not very effective.
I had a feeling there would be something to do with the continental system, which didn't really work, since it hampered it hurt the French economy more than the British economy.
Effective economic blockade against Britain.
Sorry, I don't know why I couldn't speak.
Designed to cripple his most steadfast enemy. Alexander had agreed to join the continental system at Tilsit, but it was hugely unpopular in Russia and ruinous to her finances during a period of economic crisis. When Napoleon found out that Russia was flouting the rules of the system and had resumed an illicit trade with Britain, he was furious.
I could imagine.
With both emperors accusing the other of bad faith, their two countries began preparing for war. This video is brought to you by our sponsor, Curiosity Stream, home of more than 2,500 documentaries exploring science, technology, the natural world, history, and more. In fact, there are so many free, thanks to Curiosity Stream.
Oh, ad. The timing of these bloody ads. At Tilsit, Russia swore an eternal alliance with France. Now she breaks her oaths. Does she believe us degenerate, or are we no longer the soldiers of Austerlitz? Napoleon's bulletin to the Grande Armée. Wow, that's a declaration.
Napoleon knew an invasion of Russia was a massive undertaking, especially as he still had an unfinished war in Spain that was tying down more than 200,000 troops. Nevertheless, in 1811, he began to assemble the largest army.
Well, you think about it, he's fighting a war on two fronts, which for any military genius is a dangerous predicament. It doesn't have to be Napoleon, but as you've seen with my reactions on the Epic Histories World War One series, the Germans had to figure out how to fight a war on two fronts. But it just shows here that Napoleon is kind of struggling, even though he's still got one hell of a strong army and he's still got his military genius. So, well, there's nothing more I can really add to that.
Europe had ever seen. Around 600,000 men.
Okay, that was right.
Less than half of them were French. The rest came from allied states across Europe. There was a Polish corps from the Duchy of Warsaw.
I know I'm being Captain Obvious, but if they were all French, who would be left to defend France itself, like on Russian soil, not just the Confederation of the Rhine? But I've noticed some Austrians and Prussians in there as well.
Led by Prince Poniatowski, a corps from each of the German kingdoms of Saxony, Westphalia and Bavaria, from the Kingdom of Italy, as well as Swiss, Dutch, Croat, Spanish and Portuguese units scattered throughout the army. There were even contingents from Prussia and Austria, France's recent enemies, now uneasy allies. Some of these allied troops, such as the Poles and Germans, were as reliable as their French counterparts. Others were very inexperienced, or, like the Prussians and Austrians, reluctant to be there at all. This gigantic formation was deployed in 3 armies. The main force under Napoleon himself, another led by his stepson, Eugene, and a third led by his younger brother, Jerome, King of Westphalia. Neither of these two were experienced commanders. Though one would distinguish himself on campaign, the other would not. On their left flank, Marshal MacDonald led 10th Corps with a large Prussian contingent, while the right flank was guarded by General Schwarzenberg's Austrian Corps. Another 100,000 troops were in reserve, including Marshal Victor's 9th Corps.
Even for a military genius like Napoleon, it's got to be hard to, you know, keep control of an army just that's over 500,000. And especially with Russia's terrain, it's going to be even more difficult. Especially which, unless you've been living under a rock, you'll understand how difficult that is, especially the legendary Russian winters. And I think I read somewhere they do tend to have a lot of summer thunderstorms, so this will be interesting to see how it plays out.
Initially, the Russians only had 220,000 men to face this juggernaut, organized into Barclay de Tolly's First Army, Prince Bagration's Second Army, and General Tomasov's Third Army. They would be outnumbered 2-1. But in the run-up to war, Russia scored 2 crucial diplomatic triumphs. Sweden had been at war with Russia just 3 years earlier, a conflict which cost her Finland. By a curious turn of events, Sweden was now ruled by Napoleon's ex-marshal Bernadotte. But after Napoleon occupied Swedish Pomerania without warning, a furious Bernadotte promised Russia that Sweden would remain neutral.
Ironically, the former marshal who was like basically hated by Napoleon and the French army because he didn't support one of the other marshals, I think it was Davout, and then just seemed to be nowhere in sight when he was actually needed. But that is just ironic that a former marshal's in charge of Sweden, especially Crown Prince. So a lot of this I don't know about, so the reason why I'm not adding much input is because I'm kind of like trying to take in what's going on, like. But I didn't realize Sweden had a colony on just south of the actual country itself. Just shows how little I know about European colonies on the mainland. I don't know why I say it like that.
Meanwhile, a peace treaty with the Ottoman Empire ended Russia's 6-year war against its
I knew
southern
Russia
rival.
had a big rivalry with the Ottoman Empire, but I didn't realize
These
how
two
far back it
agreements
went.
secured Russia's flanks from any strategic threat and freed up troops to face Napoleon's invasion.
I'm about to embark on the greatest, most difficult enterprise I ever attempted, but what has begun must be carried through. Wow.
On the 24th of June 1812, French troops began crossing
That's
the
an
Niemen
amazing
River
picture.
into Russian territory. The army was so large,
Modern
the
Lithuania.
crossing took 5 days. Napoleon's plan was to attack north of the impassable Pripet marshes and defeat Barclay's army, while Jerome pinned Bagration in place. French forces would then swing south to trap Bagration. Napoleon expected the campaign to be over in 5 weeks. But the sheer size of the French army convinced the cautious Barclay that retreat was his only option. Prince Bagration, a much more aggressive commander by instinct, and often Barclay's fierce critic, was forced to agree.
That mustn't have been
As
easy.
they withdrew, they burned villages and crops,
Scorched earth.
part of a scorched earth strategy
Yep.
to deny supplies to the enemy. In 4 days, Napoleon had reached Vilnius, but Barclay was gone. To the south, Jerome failed to pin down Bagration. So when Davout's First Corps swung southeast to trap him, he'd already withdrawn to safety. Napoleon's younger brother was out of his depth, stung by the Emperor's criticism, humiliated when his troops were put under Marshal Davout's command. He resigned his post and returned to Westphalia.
Wow.
The campaign was
That must
already
be
beginning to
humiliating.
expose serious flaws in Napoleon's plan. Knowing his troops would struggle to live off the land in this impoverished region, he'd organized huge supply depots and transport units to feed.
Which something the Grand Armée hasn't had to use for a very long while, because of Napoleon's corps system, if I remember rightly, they can usually disperse and then concentrate, but as he mentioned, because of the scorched earth, they couldn't live off the land, so what else could Napoleon do but set up these supply lines?
The army. But wagons rolled slowly along Russia's bad roads,
Wow.
which were turned to rivers of mud by summer thunderstorms.
Yeah, I heard they had thunderstorms.
The army had to make frequent stops to allow its supplies
That's
to
gotta
catch
be
up.
annoying.
Bad news for Napoleon's plan to catch the Russians, but a much-needed relief for the many thousands of young conscripts in his army, not used to hard marches day after day.
Wow.
Many were soon dropping out with exhaustion. Others deserted. There were also huge problems of command and control over a vast multinational army that was 3 times bigger than any Napoleon had commanded before. La Grande Armée, once famed for its speed of maneuver, had become a lumbering beast. After a pause to rest and regroup at Vilnius, Napoleon resumed his advance. Barclay continued his retreat to Vitebsk, where he hoped Bagration's Second Army would be able to join him. But Davout blocked Bagration's path at Sultanovka, forcing him to make for Smolensk instead. At Vitebsk, Napoleon clashed with Barclay's rearguard, but once more the Russians escaped, after setting fire to all the stores they couldn't take with them. Meanwhile, 300 miles away, on Napoleon's southern flank, Russian Third Army attacked and defeated the Saxon 7th Corps, forcing Napoleon to divert Schwarzenberg's Austrian Corps to their aid.
The reluctant ally.
By the end of July, Napoleon had advanced 250 miles into Russia, much further than he'd planned.
Yeah.
And the long marches in extreme summer heat continued to take a heavy toll on his men. Without...
It has been said that Russia's weather is one extreme to the other. It's too hot or it's way too cold. So it's... And I thought the weather here in Britain was schizophrenic.
Fighting a major battle, the army had already suffered 20% casualties.
Wow.
From exhaustion and illness, particularly typhus and dysentery.
Ugh.
The army had entered Russia with 250,000 horses, but they were now dying at a rate of 1,000 every day, from exhaustion and lack of fodder.
Wow.
It wasn't just cavalry horses that were dying, but the very horses that were supposed to haul the army's transport wagons, making a bad situation worse.
Jeez.
This crisis in horsepower came just as the French light cavalry, Napoleon's eyes and ears, met their match in Russia's Cossacks.
Ah, so if Napoleon had Cossacks in his army, he would have been Emperor of China long ago. Wow.
Cossacks, self-reliant, proud, ruthless, and superb horsemen, didn't play by the same rules as other European cavalry. Every day they shadowed Napoleon's army, swooping in whenever they saw an easy target, but melting away into the forests if they were attacked by a stronger force.
Clever.
Cossacks, as well as Russian partisans, made hit-and-run attacks on French supply lines and depots, forcing Napoleon to divert thousands of troops to their defense. Alongside Russian regular light cavalry, they also prevented French patrols from carrying out reconnaissance, which meant that Napoleon often lacked good information about roads or the enemy's whereabouts. Napoleon stayed 16 days at Vitebsk, resting his troops and considering his options. Among his many mounting concerns was the security of his long, exposed flanks. But at Vitebsk, he received news that Schwarzenberg had defeated the Russians at Gorodezhna. A week later at Polotsk, a French Bavarian force fought Wittgenstein's Russian First Corps to a standstill. Napoleon's flanks were secure, for now. Although his main force had been reduced to less than half its original strength, Napoleon decided to push on to Smolensk and try to force the Russians into a decisive battle for the city. Barclay was indeed under pressure to give battle from fellow commander Prince Bagration and Emperor Alexander in St. Petersburg. The army's morale and Russia's honor required it, they told him. With the First and Second Russian armies finally linking up near Smolensk, Barclay decided to attack Napoleon's army, which he believed was concentrated around Rudnya. The offensive was led by General Platov's Cossacks, who surprised a French cavalry division at Inkova. But alarmed by false reports that Eugene's Fourth Corps was outflanking him to the north, Barclay called off the attack. Napoleon, reassured that Barclay's offensive posed no real threat, began a grand outflanking move to the south to take Smolensk and cut off the Russian retreat. The so-called Smolensk maneuver was Napoleon at his best, using Murat's cavalry to screen his movements and keep Barclay in the dark. The Emperor reached the Dnieper on the evening of the 13th of August. His engineers quickly threw up 4 pontoon bridges, and by dawn the next day, his army was across. Marshal Davout led a second column across the river at Orsha, but a single Russian division, the 27th, fought a heroic fighting retreat from Krasny, delaying the French advance and buying time for Bagration to reinforce the Smolensk garrison. The chance for a surprise assault on the city was lost.
Yes.
And as the Russian army began to pull back, Napoleon displayed an uncharacteristic lack of urgency, even halting the army for a parade to mark his 43rd birthday.
Okay.
When the main attack on Smolensk began 2 days later, Napoleon opted for a frontal assault. 150 French guns battered the city as 3 French corps attacked its medieval fortifications. The Russians resisted bravely, but Barclay, fearing encirclement, ordered another retreat. With Smolensk in flames, the Russians began to pull out.
Wow.
Just as the French fought their way into the city, to scenes of utter devastation. Bagration's Second Army withdrew first. As Barclay's army followed, its rearguard was caught by Ney's Third Corps at Valutino. General Junot, commanding the Westphalian 8th Corps, had orders to cut off Barclay's retreat. But having crossed the river, he did nothing, and the opportunity was lost. A furious Napoleon swore that Junot would never now win his marshal's baton. The Battle of Smolensk cost both sides around 10,000 casualties, and destroyed one of Russia's most historic and holy cities, but settled nothing.
4 months is out, we shall be in Moscow. In 6 weeks we shall have peace. Napoleon at Smolensk.
After the missed chance to defeat the Russians at Smolensk, Napoleon paused once more to consider his options. His men were weary and far from home, and it was already late in the campaigning season. He considered sitting out the Russian winter at Smolensk and resuming the campaign in 1813. But now he was just 230 miles from Moscow. A century earlier, Peter the Great had moved Russia's capital to St. Petersburg.
Right.
But Moscow remained its historic and spiritual heart, a prize for which the Russians had to fight.
Wow.
Napoleon, always a gambler, decided to push on. The Russians faced their own dilemma. Emperor Alexander had experienced a kind of religious epiphany that summer, and rallied the Russian people to the country's defense, describing the war with Napoleon as a war to save Holy Mother Russia from the Antichrist. For months, the emperor had received conflicting advice to stand and fight or retreat. Now he decided change was needed. The cautious General Barclay kept his job, but the emperor summoned General Mikhail Kutuzov to take overall command of Russia's armies. Kutuzov had been beaten by Napoleon at Austerlitz 7 years before, but he'd since won several victories against the Ottoman Empire and was a true Russian, loved by the troops. Although Kutuzov agreed with Barclay's strategy of delay, he saw that constant retreats were destroying the soldiers and the nation's
Russian forces
morale.
need a morale boost.
If Moscow was given up without a battle, the fallout could be disastrous. And so, 70 miles west of the city, near the village of Borodino, the Russian army prepared to make a stand.
There's another ad. Right towards the end of the video as well.
If you manage a team, you have to try Monday.com. Monday.com is a platform to track.
Right.
Europe was about to witness the bloodiest day's fighting of the Napoleonic Wars. Thank you to all our...
And that'll do it. This will be another interesting video. As I said, I have heard that the Russia campaign was a disaster for Napoleon, but it is always interesting to see how it actually played out. And as I said, I didn't say much because I was just taking in information, because as I said, like earlier while reacting to these series of videos, I never knew much about Napoleon's career before the Battle of Waterloo, so this has been, as again, Epic History TV combining with History March, which I've subscribed to last week. They do great videos, and I do like the detail they put in it, because you can be thorough with a lot of it, and as I said, even with Napoleon's military genius, even he would come undone at some point. So the next one, by the looks of it, is the Battle of Borodino, which I will react to as soon as possible. But anyway, this has been another interesting video. If you like this reaction, please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.